Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for joining us, and while you're with us, please take a moment to subscribe below and don't forget to hit that bell symbol for notification. Something I hear a lot of from other YouTube content creators and those posting comments is how countries such as America, Britain, Canada and even Central and Western Europe should copy or closely emulate the alleged skills-based immigration system of Australia. So let's take a closer look at this fantastic Australian skills-based immigration system and just see how it stacks up to the myth-making, and is it worthy of the accolades it's receiving. Like so many words, terms and phrases today, they are sugar-coated, feel-good sales pitches designed to conceal the reality or the actuality or the real meaning. We are literally bombarded with these word plays day in, day out. Equality, diversity, affirmative action, safe spaces, the list goes on. Yet all these terms are corrupted by what could be termed as truth fragmentation or integrity decay. Skills-based immigration is one of these corrupted terms. You may think skilled migration means skilled, such as doctors and astrophysicists, engineers, scientists, Airbus pilots, carpenters, all with internationally recognised qualifications. You may think that's what skilled migration means. Well, think again. A 6-week typing course done on an old electronic typewriter in an optimistically named College of Honesty and Diversity in an outer suburb of some third world impoverished African city such as Kinshasa is enough to meet Australian skilled migration criteria. Daliana speaks basic tourist English. She's in her 20s and 2 finger types at about 20 words per minute. She has never actually worked in a job in her life and has no discernible skills, qualifications or experience, but somehow she managed to come to Australia as, wait for it, a skilled migrant. Skilled at what, you may ask? Well, typing, of course. 20 words per minute typing, a certificate gained in a third world country, in a 6-week course, by the way, is now a skill apparently in big demand in advanced Western economies. Didn't you know? And have you got a problem with that, you Nazi, fascist, white supremacist, racist bigot? Now, Zhu is 22 years old from rural China. She entered Australia on a student visa to study manicuring. The 12-week manicuring course is at a beauty college owned by a Chinese investor who also owns a chain of manicuring stores or shops. Upon completion of her manicuring course, Zhu gains a certificate which classifies her as educated, and it is sufficient for her to become a sponsored, skilled migrant into Australia. Sponsored by who? Well, it's the same guy who owns the certificate factory where Zhu studied, and he also, of course, owns the chain of manicuring shops, which exclusively employs Chinese rural peasant girls, and they're put up in stacked living conditions of 6 to a 1-bedroom apartment. Oh, and the same investor, of course, put up the money as a loan for Zhu to come to Australia and to cover the cost of the manicuring college fees. Now, Zhu will live as a serf worker for years to pay all this back. Now, are you seeing a pattern here? Now, it is true that Australia does not have hordes of young, unemployable, low IQ African men tearing down border fences and streaming off into the distance. But with 20 word per minute typing skills and basic manicuring grunt work being declared as needed skills, you can start to see it is first and foremost all a globalisation play, much the same as the mass third world people movement swindle in Europe or any other Western countries. It's just all dressed up in different clothes. It's also the case Australia is both a continent and an island, so no countries border Australia. There's no Mexico, there's no Africa just a 20-mile boat trip away across an enclosed Mediterranean Sea. Australia has put considerable effort and realised some success in stopping illegal boat arrivals from the alleged refugee camps in Southeast Asia, which are controlled by NGOs and people smugglers and the United Nations, and the usual cast of suspects that are behind this global movement of people. And Australia uses an offshore processing method in an offshore island, and this has incurred the ire and has really annoyed the globalists and the UN and all the leftist fake moralisers. Nonetheless, from a statistics point of view, Australia can declare they do have actually a skills-based immigration program, and that most immigrants are in possession of skills needed by the Australian economy. But this is all an illusion. Yeah, hey buddy, have you ever held a broom in your hand? You have? Okay, hey, you're a skilled migrant. Go and stand in that line over there. It's a new life for you in Australia. However, the harsh reality that's buried under what Samuel Langhorne Clemens would have described as lies, damned lies and statistics is the fact that around 40% of Australia's migrant intake is family reunions, to which no skills and no language proficiency criteria are applied. Now, depending on how you classify or define refugees, a further 20% of the total people intake, the total migration intake, is made up of refugees, including many socially incorrigible low IQ strugglers from the Middle East, Somalia and Sudan. And again, no skills or language proficiency are required. So this leaves about 40% of the immigration total as, well, ostensibly as being skilled migrants, but with two-fingered typists and probationary manicurists managing to get through this as skilled migrants, or so-called skilled migrants, we need to take a closer look here. The reality is that of the skilled migrants, not many are in fact skilled, or not in any meaningful way, and they are certainly not needed for the Australian economy. In fact, super low skilled roles such as hairdressers, manicurists, gardeners, kitchen restaurant waitstaff make up almost 3/4 of the so-called skilled migrant intake. So a 3-month course as a hairdresser or a manicurist or as a gardener or a fruit picker is enough to be declared as a skilled migrant and to be brought in. And of course this only applies to third world peasants and brown and black people. Much noise is made by the globalist media and the support phalanx of spruikers and propagandists about the large number of sponsored skilled migrants to Australia, which allegedly include legions of software programmers and technical building consultants and so on. This is a sign or an indicator, we are told, that Australian business is hiring and importing migrants with much needed skills, or that's what they tell us. So let's have a look at this. Now, an Indian labour hire business, or Indian labour hire businesses plural, because there are many of them, create these artificial jobs and then pretend, that is, they game the system, that they cannot find software programmers in Australia, and in turn sponsor a supposed skilled immigrant from, well, where do you think? India, of course, to migrate to Australia. This is a scam, and it's carried out on an industrial scale, with many thousands of fake skilled migrants being brought into Australia this way. And it's tantamount to a people smuggling ring. Language skill scams are also widespread and particularly used by Chinese immigration fronts. It goes like this. The Chinese investor insists, and he started up a business in Australia of some sort, he insists he can only employ people with Chinese language skills, and even then only of a certain Chinese regional dialect. By this sleight of hand, zero-skilled Chinese rural peasants can be brought out as immigrants, skilled immigrants, sponsored immigrants, but really they go work as cleaners and gardeners in the properties that these people invest in, or as nannies to look after the kids, or they work as sales clerks in selling apartment blocks that the Chinese property developers are controlling, and also just as general labourers. Other skills demands are more genuine, yet they can also be provisional and conditional and only apply to a small number of people. For example, stonemasons to work in rural Australia. The condition of the immigration visa is the immigrant must work in rural Australia for 5 years, and only then can they move to a large city such as Sydney. Sometimes when these immigrants apply for reduction at 5 years, they're successful, so some of them only spend 1 or 2 years in the rural area, if that. Going through the government-declared areas of skill shortages, that's the categories, the industrial categories and the occupational areas, and then looking at the immigrants brought in to supposedly meet this demand for skills at a stretch, and I mean a stretch. Perhaps 5% of the total immigrant intake are addressing anything even remotely resembling a real or material skills shortage. And even here, a more disciplined local Australian approach to training and education could easily remedy any alleged skills shortage from amongst the local citizenry. Moreover, the Australian Public Service has been expanded to astonishing proportions, a bill that's being sent to white taxpayers without their agreement or consent, so as to create artificial jobs for tens of thousands of unneeded, minimally skilled or unskilled immigrants. Many public service departments do not have anyone below mid-supervisor level who is functionally literate in English, and I've attended meetings where I haven't been able to find anyone in the room that actually speaks English competently. In many cases, whites need not apply for these jobs. They're exclusively set aside for black and brown immigrants that are being brought in who are low skilled, and the only job they can get is something basic, very basic in the public service. So these invented taxpayer funded jobs, just to absorb this oversupply of unskilled and unwanted and unneeded workers, it now rivals the old Soviet communist job creation system. The Australian immigration system overall is of course better than a complete free-for-all where just anyone turns up at the border, but not by much. The skills bar is set very, very low for migrants who are not white and come from third world, rural peasant or dirt poor basket case economies. Meanwhile, German engineers, Dutch doctors, French metallurgists, all who speak very good English, are refused immigrant visas to Australia. So let's sum up. The reality is this: the Australian immigration system, be it seemingly less chaotic than some others, achieves exactly the same globalist outcome: the bringing of masses of brown and black third world people to the white welfare states until white replacement is consolidated. And always keep in mind that the politicians that do this are nearly all white, heterosexual and male. Ponder that if you will. You've been with Tacitus today at Your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.